Coming to you from the beautiful studios in Merrifield, Virginia, steps away from the multiplex cinema where Harry Potter, the new Harry Potter movie, BJ, will be unspooling this weekend. It's the Fairfax Sports Report. My name is Greg Wyshynski of the Connection Newspapers, BJ Cooper-Willis of the Connection Newspapers, Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers. We're giddy tonight, and I'll tell you why. It's playoff football time. We've been waiting for the playoff football. It's finally here now. We're going to break down all the big games, plus give you postseason action in field hockey, postseason action in volleyball, and even a little bit of breaking sports news as usual here on the Fairfax Sports Report. Before we begin, let's thank the folks that make this show possible every single week. We are, of course, talking about the Underwriters, Quality Care Ford Service Center, servicing all makes and models, located in Fairfax, 703-383-6299. And CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. Boys, football. We're finally in the postseason. 11 long weeks we've been through this season, and now we're here. We're down to the final 8, as they say. But before we get to that, let's discuss one of those teams that's in the postseason, who, the last time we did the show, we weren't sure if they were going to be in the postseason because they were under investigation for an eligibility violation. And BJ, everything's all clear.
Well, Oakton did it on the field. They, had an 8-2 record. Did everything they needed to do, PowerPoints-wise, to get into the playoffs. And like you said, recently they had an eligibility investigation, which was an investigation done by the school to make sure they had the correct records and paperwork for one of their players, and to make sure that player was eligible. And their investigation into their own records revealed that he was eligible to play. Therefore, they didn't have to forfeit. I think it was up to maybe 5 games that he had played in that they were going to have to forfeit if found ineligible and in violation of the rules. So they didn't have to forfeit any games. They're in the playoffs, and they're hosting. And on another controversial issue, some people believe that Oakton should not be hosting because of the games that they lost to Robinson and Westfield, who play each other, and I guess we'll get into that later in the show. But just wanted to let everybody else out there know that obviously Oakton has been cleared. They're in the playoffs, and they're taking on Annandale this week.
And you wrote a very in-depth and insightful column in the Connection Newspapers this week about this issue, talking specifically about the reason for this investigation, the catalyst, if you will, for this investigation, which, of course, as it usually is, was an anonymous email sent to people in the county that said, hey, you're going to want to take a look at this because we think these people are cheating.
Yeah.
When did this email come in? Oh, it came in like a week before the end of the regular season because they're such good citizens.
Right.
But you think, as I do, that when it comes to this sort of investigation, which definitely could have had an impact on this team in the final week of the season, going into that game not really knowing which way it was going to go, that sort of thing, if the investigation had gone on longer than expected, there should be a name attached.
Yeah, and that's really what the column approached, the issue of accountability. And there has to be some form of accountability. We don't know what happened. We're not going to know that, okay? What we get is that Oakton was cleared, and that's the final word, okay? Had there been a name attached to this anonymous email accusation, maybe we would have had a different result. Maybe not. We'll never know. But it's a cowardly act. And that's what I approached in the column, talking about the people that were hurt by this act, which was an anonymous email saying, this person is ineligible, and there was a big investigation. Obviously, it didn't help Oakton at all who the player was and their, father being an ex-Redskin, in the area. So, Centerville was hurt by this because of the accusations made towards Centerville. People were saying that Centerville was going to benefit from, Oakton being out, so people were pointing the fingers at Centerville. There's a lot of programs tarnished here, and it's a hard thing to shake. The image of cheater or recruiter is a hard image to shake for a football program. And for Centerville, it's even worse maybe when you have to shake, the image and tarnish of, snitch. That's even worse.
Sour grapes.
Right.
And you did actually get a chance in the paper to address this issue with Coach Mike Skinner of Centerville.
Right.
And obviously the Wildcats football program denies any culpability in this investigation.
Yes. I mean, I talked to Coach Skinner a couple of times for this whole thing, and he had in fact been in touch with Coach Thompson over at Oakton. They're actually good friends. So my personal belief is we'll never know where it came from. You know, Coach Skinner says it didn't come from him or anybody attached to his football program. You know, he did allude in a quote that I had that he said that, you know, can't control everybody in the community. So you never know. It could be somebody who wanted to see Centerville go further. It could be somebody from a totally different school.
It could be someone from Loudoun County who's upset that the Darrell Green's kid's not going and playing football with them, obviously.
And you never know where it came from, and that is what causes so much suspicion, so much problems, animosity, tension. It's not good for anybody involved. And, you know, like I said, we'll never know either way what the true case was. Maybe if somebody had attached their name to it, maybe we would have had a different result, or maybe not. But the point is, you know, and the point that I make in the column, and if you like to read it, go to connectionnewspapers.com or pick up your local Connection, is that, you know, a little plug there.
Yeah, plug away,
you know, but really, it's worth reading because, you know, what the point is, when we write something, Jeff, you know, Greg, when we write something in the paper, we are accountable because our name is attached to it. You know, in this case, my face is attached to this in the column. So people know who to call. They know where it's coming from, and it's you know, on the other end of that, with an anonymous email with so many repercussions, you know, I think it was a cowardly act.
Jeff, we in this business that we do get this sort of thing every week. We get people who call up, leave a message on a voicemail about a coach, leave a message on a voicemail about a player, call up, say their piece, don't give their name. It happens all the time. But the difference between what we do and what the county had to do in this situation is the fact that we are sort of a conduit for the community. We're the people that they go to bitch and moan, if you will, about certain things. The county, to me, seems like they should have a higher standard when it comes to investigation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, you know, in the days of, you know, now that we have the internet, we have you know, obviously, you know, we have phones, and it was probably easier to track people when they were, you know, calling in. But, you know, with the internet nowadays, anybody can send a message anywhere and, you know, not attach a name to it.
And I think the issue with this one was that people created email accounts specifically to send these emails into the county.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at message boards, and whoever creates a message board, you know, name and writes their name. It's always Mr. Anonymous. It's always, you know, a name and a phone number or something like that. But I mean, I think that the investigation was worthwhile. It was worth looking into. But I think, you know, as long as, you know, the internet's around, people are going to be able to, you know, to spark controversy like this.
And we should also say at this point that Lansdowne, a team that is the defending state champion, a team that many people expected to play potentially for that state title again this season, they had their own issue at the end of the season. And in fact, it was an internal investigation by their own school that kind of outed the fact that they had what was considered an eligible player. Lo and behold, they get cleared too.
Yeah. I talked to somebody today. I had an off-the-record conversation with somebody who knows the situation that said, you know, basically it was a player who they had no control over. Just came in, falsified documents, played for the team, and then left. And you know, it's not a fun situation to be in because, you know, on Oakton's case, they had all the correct documentation to show. This kid hoodwinked the program. So, you know, in Lansdowne's case, they were given a second chance where, you know, like years ago, Centerville was not. And that was...
And it seemed like the Centerville one was maybe more of a... You know, if you compare them, it seemed like Centerville was the school that should have gotten off. It was a question over, you know, an administrator not getting the paperwork in time on a kid that, you know, within the rules, you know, could have been going to Centerville. Whereas, you know, this kid, you know, had no business being at Lansdowne or playing for their team, and they make the playoffs now and are, you know, probably the favorite to win the state title. Whether that had influence on the decision, you know, could be. When Centerville was you know, handed their decision, it was still the middle of the season, and, you know, they might have been able to make a playoff run. It turns out they did not. So yeah. I think it's surprising that I was surprised that Lansdowne wasn't handed the forfeitures.
But again, the bottom line, I think, in any of these situations is that when you look at the teams involved, it's Lansdowne, it's Oakton, it's not Wakefield or Stewart. Clearly, these things come down the pike at a very opportune time for other programs, at a very uncomfortable time for programs that may be in a situation where they do have a bit of a skeleton in the closet and could potentially lose a playoff spot or have to forfeit a bunch of games because of it. You know,
and I think you're going to continue to see it every year. We see new scenarios for kids that are going to one school and then move over, whether it's pupil placement, whether they're schools offers one class that another school doesn't, or you have kids moving. We have apartments that are being purchased. It's not going to stop, I don't think.
And I think you bring up an interesting point, which is that you do have a number of different ways for a student athlete to come from one school to another. And just from in talking to a bunch of people around the county off the record conversations, you do get the sense that one of the concerns in Fairfax County is you do have this tremendous turnover over the last 4 or 5 years of administrators. There's a lot of young men and women that are now in the county working in these positions that may not be out there to bend the rules, break the rules, try to make their programs better through any means necessary, but may not know the nuance of some of these situations and may make a mistake here or there. And I think the message that comes from this Oakton scenario is you have to make sure that you've got all of your I's dotted before you make any decision to bring a kid into your school and into your athletic program, because it can come back to bite you real quick if someone's paying attention to that sort of thing.
Absolutely, it seems like there's a lot more paperwork than we would think. It's not just a case of getting a signature from an administrator anymore. It's you're having a lot of checks and balances, and even if you do that, it seems like there's something that possibly could have been missed.
I know a lot of athletic directors, one in particular I spoke to, that said that they went back and looked at their paperwork after this thing broke because they wanted to make sure that everything was okay. And even though they knew they hadn't done anything wrong, they just wanted to make sure that everything was in writing the correct way that it should have been. And this thing does scare a lot of people, and really it could have been anybody, to be honest with you. And I'll just say one thing, the bigger program you are, the bigger target you're going to be. Let's not think that there's other programs out there that haven't made a paperwork glitch, but just may not be in the playoff race that people don't care about, outing at this moment. And I think that's an important point to take into consideration when thinking about this.
And there you go. Now, before we get to more sports news, you did make mention of the fact, I shouldn't say made light of it yet, made mention of the fact that the PowerPoints right. system this year has once again, it's sort of like the high school football equivalent of the BCS.
Right.
It's a system that's in place that seems like the only logical way to do things, but when someone gets hurt by it or when someone sees an inequity in it, all of a sudden we've got to figure out a new way to do this.
And I actually talked to a coach this week that did actually call it the high school equivalent of the BCS. I mean, like,
was it me? Because I'm not a coach.
You're not coaching anybody
yet.
Yet.
Oh,
yeah.
True. Okay, thank you.
But I mean, and that's the truth. That's really what it is. It's controversial when you're on the losing end of it, and that's the bottom line. Oakton, where most people are looking at Robinson and Westfield, who they lost to. Let's put that out there. Oakton is 8-2, and their 2 losses are to Robinson and Westfield. Robinson and Westfield will be cannibalizing each other from this past week and this week in the playoffs. One of those teams is coming out. Oakton is playing Annandale, and most people believe that Oakton is coming out. So a lot of people think because Oakton lost to Robinson and Westfield, they should not have home field advantage. They should be traveling, and playing a higher seeded team. But let's think about Oakton's schedule. They played some teams that they gambled on. They gambled on Stonebridge being good, and Stonebridge ended up being very good. So that Stonebridge win has fueled Oakton. Now, Stonebridge also beat Valley. Valley is up there in the PowerPoints. So the strength of schedule and the system that is set up, it just, you can't argue with it. Okay, Oakton did what they had to do. Now, Robinson hurt themselves. They played good counsel. It may have been good and prestigious for the program in the long run, but they didn't get any PowerPoints from it. So, that's where it all ends up. Westfield, you can't take anything away from Westfield. They've been incredible, but they did lose this week, and they had the opportunity to not lose, okay?
Right.
So, the way things worked out, you can't complain at the end of the season. And that's, the Post, did a story this week asking area coaches about how they felt about, the PowerPoint system. And most of them said, we knew what we were getting into going into it. And that's the bottom line.
I think the thing that always seems to get lost in this argument is people really look at it from a Concord District, Patriot District sort of point of view. They look at the Concord this year and they say to themselves, okay, there are 4 teams in that district that deserve to be in the postseason ahead of any team in the Patriot District because they're in the tougher of the 2 districts. Well, it works another way too. For years and years and years, you had Edison, Mount Vernon, and Yorktown all basically making the playoffs or coming close to the playoffs out of the National District, and one team coming out of the Liberty District, who would win the district title if the Division 6 team, Lee, didn't, or Fairfax didn't win the title, then a D5 team would win and make the playoffs. Well, that's the flip side of the equation. Those are 3 teams competing every single year because they're in the weakest district in the northern region. So how does that work? I mean, either you're going to give the benefit to the teams in the strongest district, or you're going to give it to the weakest district. You can't. I mean, to me, that just shows the system works pretty darn well. If the teams in the strongest district and the teams in the weakest district both have the same advantage.
Yeah. I mean,
you got nothing to say,
no,
do you? Yeah, you've been baffled by all of this wizardry up here.
Yeah, you make a good point, but I mean, you're still penalizing good teams.
But how are you penalizing them? By giving an automatic bid to Annandale?
Well, you can't take anything away from Annandale because they went 7-0 and won their district.
Right.
So,
and it's not their fault that their district might not be as good as the Concord.
But they lost in the last week of the season.
Well, they didn't have anything to play for. They clinched.
So, I mean, it's not a perfect system.
No.
But I don't see anything much better than it, unless you get some coach in the article this week made mention of get more teams in it. That's the only way you're going to please everybody. And I think that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. Why not get more teams? Cut the season short a little bit and get more teams in there.
How many teams do you want?
Enough so that people aren't getting left out. And I know what you're going to say. What's the cutoff? Where do you mean? I know what you're going to say.
It's the same BCS argument. It's, we should have a 4-team playoff. What about the 5th team?
Look.
What about the 9th team if an 8-team playoff?
Here's the way I look at it. Centerville should be in the playoffs this year.
No, they shouldn't. They didn't win the games.
They're a good enough team to be in the playoffs. You're right. Okay. You're going to do semantics with me. That's fine. But Centerville is a good enough team to be in the playoffs, and Annandale, if Centerville played Annandale, I don't even want to say what would happen. It would be vicious, okay? So that's all I'm saying.
Okay, that's fine.
But Annandale's a good team. I can't take that away from them. Okay. So we're making the same points. It's just...
But the 4 best teams will not be in the playoffs this year.
That's all. You could. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know if that's true. Hey, so again, talk to me in 10 years when Annandale is great and South County is great and Braddock is back to being Braddock and all of a sudden the Patriot District is the new It all happens in cycles.
Well,
you're not going to reinvent the wheel because one year someone is alleging that they got screwed by the system.
I'll put Robinson back where they came from and everybody's going to be happy this year.
Well, the bottom line is this, is that the state should have never rejected out of hand the idea that came from this very region that they should expand the number of divisions in football, where you should have 8 divisions so you can have the Marshalls making the playoffs every year. You can have Langley and those guys. Because Marshall would be in that division where they're competing against schools their size. So the northern region could have had like 10 teams in the playoffs if they had adopted that system, but they didn't want any part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a perfect system. I'd say on my point of view, I like the PowerPoints. I think it works well. I mean, but like we say, there's going to be people left out. There's going to be people unhappy, and it's just, hey, that's what keeps it. That's what keeps it in the papers and keeps it alive.
I think it's
controversial.
I think coaches are really going to have to look at who they schedule from now on.
Yeah.
Like I said, Thompson did a great thing for his team by scheduling Stonebridge.
And that was a gamble, though. Really, think about it. They scheduled 2 Division 5 teams. Madison, obviously, they're going to do that for the Outback Bowl, but that's another Division 5 team that actually panned out. So that fueled them. That really fueled them.
If it came down to scheduling, then Herndon would be in the playoffs every year. You got to win the games.
Yeah.
You can have any schedule you want. Robinson, had a ridiculously tough schedule and 1 game out of the district. All these teams have very, very hard schedules. You got to win the games.
And even if you do win the games, like you beat Good Counsel, that got you 0 points. If they would have scheduled, probably, they could have scheduled a 3-7 team and gotten enough power points to be the #1 seed right now.
But beyond the whole who belongs and who doesn't thing, the other big controversy this postseason with the PowerPoints is the fact that Robinson is a district champion, but they don't have a home game in the playoffs. Is that fair?
Happened before? It's happened before.
Well, but is it fair, though, is the question.
Sure, it's fair. You can win a division in the NFL and still be playing a wild card game.
But don't you completely devalue the district champion then?
Yeah, but it's happened before in the district. I mean, so it's not like this is something new.
It's not something, but just because it happened before doesn't mean it's fair. Is it fair?
Well, it wasn't fair last year. It's not going to be fair this year.
It's not fair.
Out Loud and Heritage won a co-district championship and isn't even making the playoffs.
Maybe it's not fair, but it's not something new. So and that's the point. I mean, these coaches know what they're getting into going into the season. Win the games, like you said, we wouldn't have this conversation. But I'll go to my grave saying Centerville should be in those playoffs, boy, because I'd love to see Dudzik launching it up, man. What an exciting team. I had a great time covering them.
One more win. And they probably would have been
three more points.
They beat Oakton or they beat Westfield, they would have been in, right?
Yeah.
Hey.
Then we'd be saying that Westfield or Robinson not making it in, something like that.
Well, then they should have won the games.
All right.
And they did. All right. So anyway, volleyball, boys. The state tournament ongoing. Unfortunately, there is no more
Northern Region teams
representation. Let me say this real quick. I know that our show doesn't necessarily go to the folks in Arlington, but Yorktown, in my opinion, is the first national district team to win a Northern Region tournament playoff game in volleyball. Now, the Patriots and Loudoun Valley both won on the same night, but Valley, of course, is sort of this vagabond team that didn't play its regular season in the Northern Region. Yorktown is the first national district team, in my opinion, to win, so congratulations to them. But you were over watching the Mighty Bulldogs ply their trade.
Well, I was watching two Bulldogs, actually. The teams that represented the Northern Region in the state tournament, Stonebridge, who was the region runner-up, and Westfield, who defeated Stonebridge last Saturday. Unfortunately, they both lost last night in their state quarterfinal games. So the Northern Region typically has a tough time in the state tournament. Out of the four regions, we are regarded as the weakest. I think Centerville 2 or 3 years ago was the first Northern Region team to actually win a state game. But Westfield had a great year. Upset Loudoun Valley, stopped a 55-game winning streak in the semifinals. So congrats to Jim Bohr over at Westfield. And Stonebridge, that was their first year in AAA, much as Loudoun Valley. So congratulations to Joe Rascator over at Stonebridge.
And you have to give Westfield tons and tons of credit. I mean, Loudoun Valley, when they entered that tournament, was basically, you had people just filling out the brackets saying they were going to make it all the way through the states.
Absolutely. They had the best player. Blair Brown's going to be going to Penn State next year. The most dominant player probably in the state. And they really limited her. They were able to kind of avoid her at the net. And Westfield brings back a strong squad next year, so I'd look for them to probably be the region favorites next year as well.
There you go. Field hockey, both of the locals also lost, this time in the semifinals. Princess Anne defeated Marshall, the Miracle Marshall Statesmen, 2-0, and Stafford defeated WT Woodson 4-0. Again, the Northern Region gets to a certain point in the states. Sometimes they get through like Woodson did a few years ago. Most of the time they don't. The power in field hockey clearly kind of tips to the southern part of the Commonwealth in this one.
Yeah, obviously, the beach has always been strong in field hockey. But I want to mention something about Marshall. They lost to last year's state champion, Princess Anne. 2-0. It was a good game, but let's be real about Marshall. This was their first time winning a regional title since 1988. Okay, that's incredible. I mean, for these girls, Sam Mills was on the team her freshman year. She's a senior now. Her freshman year, Marshall won one game, and now they're in the state tournament. That's pretty incredible. Playing against a beach team, they did win their first game against Prince George. They beat them 2-0. But also think about Marshall in this regard. They have 1,317 students at their school. They were the smallest school in the state tournament by far. Okay, and had they dropped down to the AA bracket, they would have only been the biggest school by one student.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's pretty incredible what they did, and from the talent pool they have to pull from. So, really hats off to Christina Carroll, was a district coach of the year and regional co-coach of the year. So incredible work over at Marshall.
And we should say that Andy Muir, we had this in the paper this week, Andy Muir from WT Woodson has stepped down as head coach, told the team on Monday. State championship, 3 regional titles consecutively, actually, over the last 3 years. Marshall broke that streak. Really fantastic coach, gets the most out of his team. It doesn't hurt that he's got some talent there. I remember a few players like Ashley McCulloch coming through that really made that program work over the last 3 years. And he is also the assistant athletic director at WT Woodson, and will have some input on who gets hired to be a successor. So you can imagine that will probably be a pretty daunting interview for anyone who wants to apply. Cross-country state championships at Great Meadow in the Plains on Saturday. I had the good fortune of being there and saw some really, really interesting developments. Brad Saragusa, great story. Kind of struggled in his senior year, didn't win as much as he won in his junior year. Comes out to Great Meadow and not only wins the state title, but beats Mike Spooner from West Springfield, who everyone sort of assumed was going to win the state title because his running style is more geared towards the hilly course at Great Meadow than Saragusa. Saragusa made a rally in like the last 500 meters of the race and pulled out the win, so a big win there. And the Oakton boys team defeats Thomas Jefferson, continuing their sort of revenge tour that they had against the Colonials. That's been a rivalry that's been going on for quite a while, and they win that state title. So a good boys weekend for the Northern Region. On the girls' side, you had Sarah Hadiji of WT Woodson coming in second in the girls' race. A really big finish for her because this is her first year running cross country after having a great distance year last year for Woodson in the spring track season.
Incredible.
I mean, just what I love about the state cross country is you have the region championships right before it, and you think you have it pinned down as to who's going to win, and there's always surprises. It seems like I don't think anybody thought Brad Saragusa was going to win, and then overtook Spooner in the last 500 meters.
Yep, and we should also mention that the Oakton boys were really a wonderful story. They were inspired. One of the runners on the team, his father passed away in July. They sort of dedicated the season to the family, and really kind of came through with a big effort, I thought, in the state championship race. Because that Jefferson team, it wasn't a shock that they lost in regionals, but I was a little surprised that they lost in states because that's a team that knows that course pretty well and always seems to perform well when they get to the state level year in and year out. So it's sort of a surprise that Oakton won, but a good victory for them, no question about that. Let's move back to football now. We have some review of last week's action. Week 10, or week 11, whatever we want to call it, the final week of the season, with those bye weeks.
With all those byes, we're all confused.
Centerville 35-6 over the Chantilly Chargers. The Wildcats close out the season with a victory.
And Centerville finishes at 8-2, not good enough to get into the playoffs, but one of their better campaigns in recent years. And I believe Drew Dudzik, his final touchdown pass went to Cameron Dose. Two who could be going to college together. I know they're getting recruited now, but probably really good friends off the field. So nice to see them hook up one last time. And Chantilly finishes the year 5-5 after going 0-10 last season. So Mike Lawley's first year. Good to see them with a good campaign this year. Really aren't able to take on the big schools yet, but maybe in a couple of years Chantilly will be back. Giving some games to Centerville and Westfield.
What a turnaround though, from 0-10 to 5-5. You don't usually see that. And how much better talent are they really working with over there? I mean, it just that's a pretty incredible turnaround.
They lost one of their quarterbacks and wide receivers to Westfield. So I think one of their big highlight wins of the year was beating Madison in the middle of the year. So they beat one playoff team at least.
There you go. And we should also mention Lake Braddock. Also turning around from 0-10, they finished 6-4 on the season, so a great job out of Jim Poitras there. They lost in the last week of the season to Lee, but 6-4 from 0-10 is a great turnaround for that program, which really seems like it's headed back in the right direction. Edison, 45-13 over Mount Vernon, and they go 9-1, and they go 6-1 in the National District, and they fly. The Eagles fly into the Division 5 playoffs this week to visit Loudoun Valley.
They're going to need to fly out
there.
Really?
Out to Valley because it's like in West Virginia, right?
Let's go. It's close.
There you go. Falls Church 41-6 over Stewart. Great year out of the Jaguars. 6-4 and 5-2 in the National District. So a solid year. I'm sure that the playoffs would have been the optimum thing for the Jaguars to make, but I think that you got to look at that season and be pretty proud of what Falls Church was able to do. Herndon 48-12 over Fairfax, and the struggles continue for the Rebels. 1-9 on the season, 0-6 in their first season in the Concord District. And Herndon, meanwhile, finishes 6-4 and 2-4.
They beat the teams they should have beat. Came close to beating Robinson earlier in the year, but I think as the story usually unfolds for them, not able to beat one of those top tier teams to get into the playoffs.
Well, write it down because I'm saying it now. Herndon is going to be an incredible football team next year. I mean, the likes that we have not seen in this area in a long time. Zay Lopez is a junior quarterback at Herndon. You don't have quarterbacks at Herndon, but you do now. And he had a great junior season. They are losing some of his receiving core, but they've got a bunch of young talent at running back. Chris Thompson is going to be a senior next year. DeAndre Richardson, who actually transferred to Herndon this year from South Lakes, is a sophomore, really getting it done on the ground for him there too. So I really see Herndon as being a legitimate threat next year. I thought they were going to be maybe a bit more this year, but that young talent develops and they get some defense back too wow, they're going to be really incredible to deal with next year.
Tough division, though.
I know, and
Still
it's the
tough
same
division.
story every year.
Tough division.
And Tommy Meyer over there knows it, but
Herndon made it a couple years ago.
I think they can do it next year. They don't get quarterbacks like that at Herndon, and that's making the difference.
Langley, in one of the few remaining great rivalry games in the final week of the season, Langley 14-3 over McLean. The surprise for me in this game is seeing the score McLean had. I mean, McLean is a team that definitely can put some points on the board. For Langley to hold them to a field goal is pretty impressive.
Well, what happened was, Rick Rivera and his, been in there for a couple of years and gave, I guess, a parting gift is what he called it, to Brendan Griffin, who's a senior who started as a quarterback, playing as a sophomore, played for McLean as a quarterback, and wanted to give him a going-away present, so let him play the whole first half. They ran the option. He's a bit faster than the junior they have at quarterback, and it didn't hurt them. They played well, but Griffin is more of a running threat, and so while they had him running the option, it wasn't as effective as him pounding away. Eric Smith had a good night. Thomas Haffey had a good night for McLean. But wow, the story for Langley was Josh Siegel again. This kid is going to be incredible. Obviously, we've talked about the line over at Langley, but boy, he tore it up. Over 20 carries in the first half, and really they went to him for the first 20 of 34 offensive plays. So he's really the story over there at Langley.
Langley finishes 4-3 in the Liberty District after a rough start, and McLean was 3-7 overall. So a bit of a disappointment for the Highlanders this year. I imagine they probably wanted to be a little bit better than that. A game that they're going to talk about for quite a long time in the halls of Madison High School. Madison 27, Marshall 18. Marshall had the Warhawks beat.
Yeah.
They had them beat, and you had a large...
Let me show you.
All they needed was...
You had a large contingent from Yorktown High School watching this game, because if Madison had lost, Yorktown's probably in the playoffs.
All right.
They needed to get to Jim Larinaga.
This is what Marshall needed to do, all right? This is the first down, okay?
Yeah.
4th and inches.
Yeah.
They needed to do this.
Right.
And Madison stopped them. 4th and 1, got the ball back. They had, Warren Anderson, the quarterback at Madison, got hurt against Jefferson the week before, so was out. Kevin Healy got his first start at quarterback for the first time in his career at Madison. So he gets in there. What a dream night for him. Things are looking bad, but then he gets in there and turns it around. They throw a halfback pass. He hands the ball off on a trick play to Kevin Ashcraft, and then he streaks down the sideline. Kevin Ashcraft launches one up 40 yards. He takes it down to the 7, and they score on the next play on a fade pass from Healy to Justin Duncan. And Justin Duncan has had just an incredible last 2 games. He's had 500 yards rushing combined in the last 2. So they've really turned it on, and I went there. I missed the game, but I stopped by the school after the McLean-Langley game on my way home and went into the coach's room, and they were all just sitting in there in shock. Yeah, they were just wide-eyed. It was a 40-yard pass, but by the time I left after talking to all of them, it was a 55-yard pass or a 65-yard pass. It was just an incredible feeling, and Madison really almost blew a playoff spot to a Marshall team, which really thought they were going to win the game, and almost did.
Yeah. Oakton 21-14 over Annandale. These two teams, of course, will meet again this week in a game we'll preview later in the show. Robinson 14, Westfield 10 in an extraordinarily anticipated game, Mr. Graham.
Yes, it was highly anticipated. Close to what I'm told, 7,500 folks went over there to Burke.
Wow.
Definitely had to get there early to this one. We have some highlights. And this was Ryan Shaughnessy. Opening drive for Westfield, scores on a 25-yard trap play.
Connection photographer Pam Brooks in the shot right there, by the way.
Yes, and most of the first half was marred by fumbles, fumbles and turnovers. Westfield had 3 turnovers in the first half. Robinson had 2. So this game actually went in halftime 7-7. This is Lucas Caparelli scoring on his 31-yard touchdown run. Juked a couple defenders there, but that was the main action for the first half.
Bit more of a defensive-heavy game than you might have anticipated.
Well, I anticipated Robinson's defense, loading up on and Evan Royster. They did a good job on him. I think he gained about close to 50 yards at half. But yeah, turnovers were the story in this game. That pass by Josh Whitner goes off of Dante Davis and is picked off by Lucas Caparelli, also playing defensive back.
The other story in this game is the fact that Royster
Here's another fumble up here.
Was held under 100 yards rushing, but more importantly, was a bit banged up in the game, right?
First carry of the second half, he took a sweep right by the sideline. He hurt his ankle. So
that was a fumble on the 1 yard.
That was a fumble on the 1 by Lucas Caparelli. It looked like Robinson was going to go in, and then here's an interception by Westfield on Matt Goff. So yeah, it was. I mean, the balls, they were just changing hands in this game.
Here you see Caparelli on another strong run.
And Caparelli had close to 35 carries, I think, in this game. And here's a 1 yard touchdown run that proved to be the game winner. Here's a short kickoff by Robinson. And Westfield got right around midfield, looking to get that game-winning touchdown. It was 14-10 at this point.
And Westfield can do that to you late in the game. I've seen them do it a couple times, where they can just come back and bite you for 2 or 3 touchdowns before you blink your eyes in the fourth quarter.
We should see I think we're going to see there was a fake punt that Westfield tried that was unsuccessful, and this was Westfield's last drive of the game.
Pokey smokes.
Michael Lennon completed a pass to Cameron Hadnock. Got down to about the 20 in the closing minute, but Robinson came up with a big sack, and that was the game. The defense held on at the end.
Robinson's defense is definitely a big game defense. I think they've proven that time and time again. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this week when those teams meet again at Westfield, which we will preview later on in the show. Stonebridge 35, South Lakes 14. The Bulldogs finished the season at 9-1, 7-0 in their first season in the Liberty District, and roll into the playoffs as the #1 seed.
Top seed, scoring about 28 points per game, but going against the Madison defense that I think averaged around 12 points against. So I mean, that's going to, even though it's a 1-4 game, I think that's going to be a heck of a matchup.
Yeah, I certainly seem to think so. I think Madison's going to take that. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that later.
Previews,
we got a lot to say about that.
I'm itching on that one.
WT Woodson 35, Jefferson 34 in overtime. Pardon my colloquial language, but mad props to the Cavaliers for winning this game. I mean, that is a program that has been through the ringer this year. You lose a ton of leadership and a ton of seniors off a championship team. They then lose a bunch of other seniors who decide to just leave the team during the course of the year. Yet in the final week of the season, in a game that did have some playoff implications at kickoff time, they win 35-34 in overtime over a Jefferson team. Woodson finishes 3-7 on the season. 2-5 in the Liberty, but they definitely head into the postseason on a high.
Robinson needed Jefferson to win this game. Had Jefferson won, I believe Robinson would have hosted Westfield this week. Instead, the game's going to be at Westfield. But for Woodson to beat a Jefferson team, even though Jefferson was out without Matt Wong, their starting quarterback, a great way to finish over there. I'm sure as they go into next season, they're gonna look at this win and try to build from there.
West Springfield 52-21 over South County. Springfield finishes a disappointing 5-5 on the season. And South County, I think if you would ask some people at the beginning of the season whether or not the Stallions were going to win a game, you'd probably find more that said no than said yes. But they finished 1-9. They got that big win against Hayfield a few weeks back. And I think it's clear from looking at the way this team has played. Again, they had a very strong first half against Springfield, but didn't necessarily finish strong. Clearly, Pete Bendorf has his program headed towards the right direction. They've got some parts. It'll be interesting to see what he does with a full off season to kind of work with some of those other positions, the trenches, some of the other skill positions, to see what they come back with next year. So they definitely are making strides over at South County.
Absolutely,
they're going to get good pretty quick.
South County, I don't think any team finished without a victory this year. So South County got theirs, and West Springfield, I think they really were hurt by their opening season loss to Stonebridge. But Peter Lodge, he's going to be a senior next year, their quarterback, heavily recruited, probably going to go D1. I heard Virginia's looking at him, so he could be a teammate of Keith Payne over at Oakton, who's going to be going to UVA.
Lodge threw 5 touchdowns in that game, in that win over South County. So, I mean, he's definitely got a respectable arm.
Absolutely, and I think that was part of the problem with Springfield this year, is that they started out the season not really knowing which way they wanted to go. I mean, you had them throwing the ball like 50 times a game, and then all of a sudden they were trying to be more balanced. So it kind of,
I think defensively was ultimately probably where they were hurt.
I think you hit the nail on the head on that one, my friend. All right, playoff time, boys. Division 6 region semifinals. Annandale at Oakton. I see in the Connection newspaper pigskin prognosticator box across the board. And when I say across the board, I mean everybody. All 9 prognosticators picked Oakton in this game. Is there any reason to think that Annandale's going to win?
Well, it was a close game this week, 21-14. And you know, I didn't think that would be a close game at all. The only explanation that there could be for it being a close game is that Oakton came out vanilla, didn't want to show them a lot for the next week, didn't want to say, here's our big stuff. But talked to Keith Payne over there, who is the running back, and he said that wasn't the case. He said they just came out a little bit flat. I talked to Coach Thompson over there, and he says about the rematch, he doesn't see any scenario where it wouldn't be a close game. You know, we know Oakton's big guns. You know, we know all the big players over at Oakton. Annandale kind of falls by the wayside sometimes because, you know, they're a team that hasn't done well, you know, but they've got some players over there. Nathan Cartagena is the quarterback, and he just reached the 1,000-yard passing mark, you know, over there, and he's been incredible for them this season. So, you know, they've got some players. He was elusive. He torched Oakton, actually, for over 100 yards rushing. They haven't given that up to a quarterback, I don't think, this whole season. So, you know, maybe they just didn't come out as much amped up as they should have been. But I look for an interesting rematch.
I'm interested in an injury report because I heard Coach Joe Thompson over there has a mean case of the flu. So.
Actually, he's broken it now. You know,
the fever broke.
All right. The fever broke. He's been drinking his tea, and everything's all right.
He hasn't been eating chicken, has he? Because that could be a different kind of flu, and I don't think they want that over here.
Oh,
for sure.
man.
Good old Bennigan's.
All right, so I'll say this about Annandale. What would worry me about this game from an Oakton perspective is Dick Adams has been waiting a long, long time to get into the postseason, and he is a darn good football coach, and I would not want to line up my team against a Dick Adams team in the postseason, knowing that that guy is going to do every single thing he can to ensure that his team remains in the postseason as long as it can. So that's the one thing I'd be worried about, that and the fact that Annandale can push you around pretty well on the offensive side of the ball. So that's going to be an interesting game, but I do think that Oakton is going to win this game.
I actually mentioned that Cartagena has thrown for 1,000 yards. He's rushed for 1,000 yards and thrown for almost 500. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, that's like 500 less than 1,000.
Yeah.
Then,
right.
Okay.
So it's a big difference. I think we should know.
Robinson at Westfield is the Fairfax Sports Network Game of the Week, or GOTW, as we abbreviate it here on the old show. This is an interesting game, and there are a lot of different angles being played by both teams going into this game. Royster's health, Westfield's quarterback situation. You know, did Robinson's effort in the final week of the season, is that going to necessarily carry over a second time against Westfield now that Westfield has sort of seen what Robinson can throw at him? This is a tough one. I see in the pigskin prognosticator box that myself and BJ have selected the Westfield Bulldogs, while you and Rich Sanders, who currently is leading the prognosticator box with a sterling record of 77-33, you have both selected the Robinson Rams.
Well, I think I have a little bit of an advantage having seen the game even last week.
All the football.
Even last week. Greg, like you said, a number of questions as far as Westfield, the turnovers. They came into the game. I talked to Coach Verbanek today, and he said they had 2 interceptions coming into the game. Those were their 2 turnovers the entire year as far as first-teamers. We know Westfield destroyed a bunch of teams and had their first-teamers out. But 3 turnovers against Robinson, all 3 from quarterback Josh Whitmer, who's been splitting time with Mike Glennon. Whether Whitmer gets to start this week, whether they split time, that's a big question. But I think their big key is getting Royster some more running room. They run a zone blocking scheme, where you're not actually blocking a man, you're going to a zone and trying to block. And Robinson was just filling those zones. I think in the second half, Royster had about 10 yards. So they're going to have to find ways to get him the ball out in more space. And for Robinson, Lucas Caparelli carried the ball about 35 times. He's their main weapon. He's a little bit banged up. Whether he's going to be able to carry the load like that again could be. I think they're going to get a little bit from need more from Matt Goff this week. Passing game really wasn't evident against Westfield.
Of course, the concern for Robinson is the fact that if Caparelli is banged up, he's also the passing game. He is their target in the passing game as well as being their featured back. He's the guy who gets out there for those long passes from Goff, who can definitely throw the ball downfield. Bottom line for me, from a Westfield perspective, is Royster. Whitmer, Glennon, it doesn't matter. If Royster doesn't score at least 2 touchdowns in this game, they're cooked. And he needs to be as good as he's been in every other win they've had this season. And if he's not that good, they're not going to win. That's
right.
The bottom line.
Like last year's playoffs, the first round, he was held to 59 yards against Oakton, and Oakton blew him out. It wasn't even a close game. It was I think it was 30-something to nothing. This game, obviously, projects to be much closer. But like you said, as Westfield, as Royster goes, so does Westfield.
Here's why Westfield's going to win this game. All right.
Why Westfield's going to win by B.J. Cooper.
Yes.
Pay attention, all you Rams out there.
Westfield is going to win this game because there is no way that Evan Royster is going to be held to that type of rushing output 2 weeks in a row. It's not going to happen, okay? And another thing, for those that say it's not a good thing to have 2 quarterbacks in a rotation, well, let me tell you why it's a good thing. Because both are good, capable quarterbacks that could start at any school, including, obviously, Westfield. But last week, Whitmer struggled. He was pulled. Glennon was put in. There's no other school in this area where you can pull a starting quarterback, put another quarterback in, and have the exact same shot at winning the game. There is no depletion in talent. They're almost equal. And obviously, they're not relying on those guys to win the game, but they can certainly lose the game for you. Right. You're relying on Royster. You're not relying on the quarterback. But if one of them's having a bad day, you throw the other one in there, and that's what we saw this week. And that's the versatility that I think helps.
I'd almost argue to the point that they're going to probably have to find something in the passing game to win this game. Glennon showed when he came in, he was able to pass effectively when he got time to throw. As we saw there late, he completed a real long pass to Cameron Hennott. I think they're going to have to throw a little bit more, and maybe that will create some room from Royster.
Right.
When Robinson knows, hey, Royster's coming, we can put 10 guys on the line and just run into his running lanes. It makes it real easy for them. If they can pass, I think that's going to help them.
Well, when you turn the ball over 3 times in the beginning of the game and you look at Royster's rushing yards, 59 yards, you've got to open up the running game with the pass. People usually say open up the pass with the run. It's opposite over there. And maybe that's why he was held to such a low output, because they sniffed out the pass early and all they had to do was sit on the run.
Interestingly enough, fair or unfair, Robinson has had this stigma attached to them since the Centerville game of having some problems in the secondary. Centerville was able to move the ball through the air pretty well against them. Obviously, Centerville is an amazing passing team. They run a completely different offense than Westfield does.
But like we saw in the Westfield-Centerville game, Westfield was able to pass on Centerville, so they can pass. And I think they're going to need to.
They might need to, but I think it comes down to Royster. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets less than 100 yards if he's hurt. His health is a very, very big concern for them right now. There's
no way that Evan Royster is going to be held under 100 yards rushing.
Jack Curtis, are you listening out there?
Is this going to be do we need to make a gentleman's wager? Or will you do something if he gets held to under 100 yards?
Jim Larrañaga is listening.
Do you have any ideas? Can we throw a pie? Can we throw a pie in your face if he gets less than 100 yards?
I'll take a pie in my face if Evan Royster, you listen to me, Royster.
All right.
I have your number. I know where you live. I will find you. If I have to take a pie in the face because you don't rush for over 100 yards.
You got it. You got it.
And that's it. I will take a pie in the face.
All right, well, let's make a viewer advisory now. We don't have a show next week because of Thanksgiving. The following week, the week from next Wednesday, or whenever the hell our show's on, this man will take a pie to the face if Evan Royster is held to under 100
And you know what? Let's amp it up a little bit.
Yeah?
What are you guys going to do if he does? I will allow Mike McGurk from Robinson to come on here and throw that pie in my face. You hear me, McGurk? You keep making fun of my picks. All right? I will allow him to come on here and throw it in my face. But what are you guys going to do?
We'll not throw a pie in your face if he does. We'll figure that out.
Two-way street.
We simply don't have the time for this sort of garbage now. B.J. Kubarula's pie face challenge.
Incredible.
Division 5 regional semifinals. Madison at Stonebridge. Now, this is the thing we should have made the gentleman's bet on, because you're convinced that Madison's going to win this game.
I'm taking another pie to the face, man. We'll do two. We'll do two. We'll just stand me up and just keep launching them, man. But, hey, Madison's going to win that game. I was at the last game. I was in Loudon watching Madison travel out there, and they got it done. But obviously they didn't win. They were in a situation. It would have been a 24-yard field goal to win that game in regulation. They didn't take it. Now, over there at Madison, they're not going to tell you it's because of the kicking problems they have. But that's the truth. They had a problem with kicking. And they couldn't kick the field goal to clinch the game. Has that changed since? No. But they're not going to be in that situation again. They shoved it down Stonebridge's throat when they were on Stonebridge's field. Stonebridge caught a bunch of lucky breaks and won in overtime. They're not going to catch those breaks this time. Madison is on a high after that Marshall win, and Gordon Lieb said it best over there. They're peaking at the right time.
Please be telling me the field conditions of the first Stonebridge, were they arid like a desert, or were they a bit moist?
All right, it wasn't a desert. It was a bit moist, but it wasn't anything that stopped either team from running their offense. There was no rain. It was just a wet field. And you know what? If you can't play on a wet field, maybe you shouldn't be playing football.
I think that Stonebridge did not know it was their first time playing Madison and a Gordon Live team. It's a tough team to play against if you don't know what's coming at you, that 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense and the toughness of those teams. I think they are going to be ready to play Madison, and I think they're going to beat Madison. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I think they're going to beat them comfortably. This game will not go to overtime.
There are question marks, though, surrounding Warren Anderson and his health. I've been told that he will be starting. He sprained his left ankle against Jefferson, like we said, and Madison got the win basically without him. He came in for a couple plays at the end of the game, but there's question marks about him. But I've been told that he will start. And the thing that hurt Madison last time they played Stonebridge was they didn't throw the ball a lot. They threw it maybe 5 times the whole game. You can't open up. Madison is a double wing run offense. Let's know what we're talking about here. Okay, that's what they do. But you have to open it up. And they threw the ball maybe 5 times. I was talking to the Stonebridge coaches afterwards. They were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe that they only threw the ball 5 times. And to win this game, they're going to have to put it in the air a bit more.
Mickey Thompson, coach team against the Gordon Live coach team. You selected Stonebridge. Mickey, a little bit. What makes you think they're going to win?
The last 3 years they've made the playoffs. They've had the last 2 at home, and they're 3-0 in those games. They know how to win at home in big games. Coach Thompson's been in a lot of big games. I think Gordon Live has a tendency to be out coached sometimes. Like you said, in the first game, just determined not to throw the ball. Consistent coaches couldn't understand why we didn't throw the ball more. And after the game,
not Madison's coaches, Stonebridge's coach. Yeah.
Why didn't they throw the ball more? I think it's Stonebridge. At home is virtually unbeatable in the playoffs. And I think they're going to take it.
Edison goes and plays Loudoun Valley for the second time this season. The first time they traveled to the Vikings home field, they lost 21-19. But Coach Vaughn Lewis said that they were virtually outplayed in every phase of the game. It is a huge home field advantage for Loudoun Valley in this game. But I think the key to this game is the fact that Edison has Devin Clark back and running well in their backfield. He was hurt in the first meeting between these two teams. He didn't see much action. He's back now. He went well over 100 yards in the last game of the season against Mount Vernon. I think having him and Keone Kyle back there, plus Lloyd at quarterback, plus Justin Smith at wide receiver, this is more like the Edison team that we've all felt could be the best team in Division 5. I think they're going to handle the Vikings in Purcellville this weekend.
And like you said, Edison said they were outplayed in every facet, and it was still only a 2-point game. We know that Edison didn't have good field position. Loudoun Valley was getting the ball close to midfield virtually every time. Edison had a lot of turnovers, so obviously if you're going to turn the ball over, you're probably not going to win the game. If all things are equal in this game, if Edison doesn't shoot themselves in the foot like they did in the first one, you'd have to give them the edge.
Wrong again, fellas, and let me tell you why.
Pie number 3.
I'll tell you why for pie number 3. Valley's got an incredible home field advantage. They already beat the team once. All right, granted, Edison's got some players back, but Valley's defense can tear you up. They can eat you up. They're going to keep that offense off the field. And Valley's offense may not be the most explosive, but their defense will keep Edison off the field. That home field advantage is priceless. They're driving 3.5, whatever hours you want to call it, in traffic away. Valley's going to get the win. It's another pie for me.
Hold on a second, Isaac. Yes, Sarah Lee. Yes, we're going to need a crate 2 weeks from now. Okay, thank you.
Oh, man.
Central Region Division 6 Region Semifinals. Highland Springs is playing at Meadowbrook. Patrick Henry is playing at LC Bird. Division 5 Regional Semifinals. What is that name, BJ? I can't read.
Mataoka.
Thank you.
For all you Indian folks out there.
Huguenot.
At Deep Run. Deep
Man,
Run rolling
I'm so
deep,
happy
man.
that every team around here is named Marshall and Madison.
Deep
Huguenot,
Run.
Macatoka, what?
Deep Run's rolling deep in all their sports, Jeff.
FSN Top 10 Northern Region Football.
Volleyball.
Herndon, Madison, Annandale, Edison, Loudoun Valley, Stonebridge, Centerville, Oakton, Westfield, Robinson. That is also the top 10 in the connection.
Notice that Centerville is number 4 and Annandale is number 8, but number 8 is in the playoffs.
There you go. Well, that's where you go. PowerPoints. We got Oakton leading the pack, as you can see, with a slim margin over Westfield. And there's Annandale at number 8 there, BJ. They are.
And notice
where Centerville is.
Centerville is number 5. Okay, great. Division Virginia AAA State Top 10. Oakton, Westfield, Robinson. Oh, Centerville's not on the list. I guess they. All right. FSN Cox 35 game of the week. We're talking about the Westfield-Robinson game. Robinson traveling to Westfield this Friday night. Games there Saturdays at 6 on Cox 35 and repeat daily at 5 a.m. and 6 p.m. And pleased to be visiting us on the web, www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Please check out the exciting, thrilling photo gallery filled with pictures of all of us. It's fantastic. Thank you, Quality Care Ford Service Center. You service all makes and models, 703-383-6299. And thank you, CCI Screen Printing, for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. Yeah.
Little disclaimer about the PowerPoints. We should note that those PowerPoints were put in effect before the VHSL rendered Lansdowne games eligible, or whatever you want to call them, the non-forfeited games. So those were the PowerPoints, for the state, for Lansdowne was given back their games.
Gotcha. Of the teams that are left in this tournament, and now we have 8, we've got 4 in Division 5 and 4 in Division 6. Is there one team that would really shock you out of those 8 if they won a regional title? Is there one team that kind of stands out, or would you not be surprised if any of them won?
Annandale.
Annandale. That's the easy answer.
Yeah.
I guess it would be Annandale only because, not necessarily because they're not as good as any of the other teams in their division, but I think the fact that they would have to go through Oakton and then either Westfield or Robinson, that's a pretty arduous task. That's a pretty rough road to win a regional title. I don't know if they're up for it.
In Division 5, I'd say it'd be Edison, because think about the road they have to travel. You got to go all the way out the valley, and then whoever wins for them, they still, it's still another trying week for that team. So
I don't know if Fairfax County Public Schools will allow it, but I wonder if they can just get a Ramada floor and do some homeschooling for a week if they have to play Stonebridge and just hang out in Loudon for a week. Almost like they're a college team.
Wouldn't be bad. There's a lot of good things to do out in Loudon. I know 101 things to do out there.
Maybe even more.
You can go through the maze. I have been saying, I've been as hardcore an Edison guy as you've been a hardcore Oakton guy since the beginning of the season. I think Edison's the cream of the crop in Division 5. I think they're going to win the title.
They rise to the top, man.
And they don't eat a pig. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching us. Like I said, off next week, back the week after for the Cooperulis Pie Challenge, as it will be known as. Thanks for watching, and enjoy some great football this weekend. In fact, I believe the Giants are playing this weekend, aren't they yet?
The Giants will be playing this weekend.
Let's hope they can show up this week.
Oh, yeah, a little trouble.
Just wanted to mention Jim Larinaga here took the George Mason Patriots to the Coaches vs. Cancer Classic and almost upset Wake Forest.
Wow.
They took them to overtime and
Fantastic.
only lost by 5 points. Now, I'm not big on moral victories, but I'll take this one.
And hey, it's good to have you here, Jim.
Go Patriots.
There you go. There it's right there. There he is. He's very, very happy. Well, oh, jeez. All of a sudden, it's a puppet show.
And the George Mason basketball season is upon us, so all of you Fairfax sports fans, get out and go see a game.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching, everybody. Enjoy the weekend.